human guides alien girl through a maze of ruined towers, only to learn she built them herself. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. John Miller, a seasoned soldier, stood at the edge of a desolate landscape, the ruins of towering stone structures stretching out before him. The wind howled through the broken towers, carrying with it the sharp sting of cold. As he adjusted the strap on his backpack, he glanced to his side, where a young alien girl named Selena walked beside him. Her skin was a pale shade of violet, a striking contrast to the dull, grey stone around them. Her eyes, a deep blue, scanned the horizon, her expression thoughtful yet serene. John couldn't help but admire her calm demeanor, despite the seemingly endless maze of ruined towers they were navigating. Each step felt heavier than the last, the air thick with the weight of untold history. As they walked, the silence between them stretched on, broken only by the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional creaking of the crumbling structures above them. Selena, for her part, was lost in thought, her gaze flickering from tower to tower, as if searching for something that John couldn't see. He glanced at her, wondering what went on behind those intense eyes. He had been guiding her for what felt like hours, but despite the grueling journey, she never seemed to tire, never asked for rest. He, on the other hand, was starting to feel the strain of the journey. The heavy pack, the relentless cold, the unyielding maze of rubble, it was all beginning to take its toll. As they came to another intersection of ruined pathways, John stopped and turned to face her. "How much further?" he asked, his voice rough from the dry air. Selena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied the paths ahead, her fingers lightly brushing the surface of a fallen column as if trying to read its history. After a moment, she turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "We're almost there," she said, her eyes never leaving the maze ahead. "You've been leading me through these ruins, John, but it's not what it seems." John frowned, a flicker of confusion passing through him. He looked at her, trying to decipher her words. "What do you mean?" Selena's gaze finally met his, her lips curling into a faint smile, but there was a depth of understanding in her eyes that sent a chill down his spine. "I built them," she said simply. "These towers. I built them myself." John's heart skipped a beat as the weight of her words settled in. The towering structures around them were not relics of some ancient civilization, they were the creations of the girl walking beside him. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what she had just said. The thought of this young alien girl, so fragile and small in appearance, having the power and intellect to build such monumental structures was almost unfathomable. Yet, looking at her now, he couldn't deny the truth in her words. She was no ordinary being. As he stood there, processing the information, a new sense of awe began to replace the confusion. This journey was no longer just a simple trek through the ruins of a forgotten world, it was a path into the heart of a mystery far greater than anything he had imagined. John stood still for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The words Selena had spoken echoed in his mind. "I built them myself." It was impossible to fathom. These towering ruins, stretching endlessly in every direction, were her creations. He glanced at the alien girl walking beside him, her pale violet skin glowing softly under the dim light of the ruined city. She seemed so small, fragile even, yet the enormity of what she had done was almost overwhelming. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant howling of the wind as it swept through the broken towers. Finally, John spoke, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing in his head. "You built them? All of these?" Selena nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yes," she replied quietly. "Each tower, each structure, was made with my own hands. My people, we built a civilization here, but it was destroyed long before I arrived." John felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He had seen these ruins, this vast landscape of broken stone, but never once did he imagine they were the remnants of something created by a single individual. How? How is that possible? You're just what? She interrupted, her voice sharper than before. John hesitated, not wanting to offend her. I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. It's just, these towers are enormous. They've been standing for centuries. I thought maybe you thought they were built by a whole race. Selina finished for him, her tone softening. She glanced at him, her blue eyes shimmering with a mixture of sadness and pride. I understand. Most people would think that. But no. It was me. I had the knowledge, the skill. My race was advanced in ways that most can't comprehend. John was silent for a long time. His mind was racing as he tried to grasp the full extent of what she was saying. He had always thought of civilizations as collective efforts, monumental works built by countless individuals. But Selina was different. She had built all of this on her own. It was nothing short of extraordinary. They continued walking in silence, the weight of the revelation hanging between them. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, a winding maze of broken stone and overgrown vegetation. As they walked, John couldn't help but feel a sense of awe toward Selina. She was not just some survivor of a fallen civilization. She was its creator, its architect. And now, she was the last of her kind, wandering through the ruins of her own making. Finally, after what seemed like hours of walking, they reached a clearing at the center of the ruined city. In the middle stood a massive stone structure, its walls covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story, though John couldn't decipher them. Selina stopped in front of it, her expression unreadable. This is where it all began, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. This is the heart of my people's legacy. John stepped forward, feeling a sense of reverence. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Selina had created all of this, and now, it was all that was left. She had been the architect of a civilization that had long since crumbled. And yet, she remained, a living testament to the strength and resilience of her people. It's incredible, he said, his voice filled with wonder. I don't think I can even begin to understand what you've been through. Selina turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. You don't have to understand, she replied, her voice calm but firm. You just have to accept that I am not like other beings you've encountered. My story is one of loss, of survival, of creation. But I will never be the same as I once was. John nodded, his mind swirling with questions. But there was something in her voice, something in the way she spoke, that told him there was more to her story. Something that she wasn't ready to share yet. He didn't press her. Instead, he stood beside her, both of them gazing at the ruins they had just walked through. They had reached the center, the heart of her civilization. And though the towers stood in silent testimony to the past, John knew that the journey was far from over. For Selina, the architect of all this destruction, was still here, still fighting to survive in a world that had long since forgotten her people. John stood silently next to Selina, his eyes scanning the grand ruins before him. The wind had picked up, and it carried the scent of distant rain mixed with the sharpness of the stone, a reminder that this place, once full of life and purpose, was now a memory, slowly fading into the past. Selina's gaze was locked on the massive stone structure ahead, her face a mix of nostalgia and quiet determination. John had been guiding her for days through the maze of towering remnants, but this place, this heart of her civilization, felt different. There was a heavy weight in the air, as if the ground itself remembered what had once been. You said this was where it all began, John said, his voice low, almost reverent. But what happened? What destroyed all of this? Selina's eyes softened as she glanced at him, her lips pressing together for a moment before she spoke. A war, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A war for resources, for power. My people were not always as peaceful as they once appeared. We thought we could conquer the stars, but in the end, we were consumed by our own ambitions. John nodded, absorbing her words, understanding the weight of her history. The ruins around them were a silent testament to that lost ambition. He knew that stories like this were never simple. Empires rose and fell, and the cost of such power was often measured in lives, in sacrifices, in things that could never be undone. And now, he asked, glancing at Selina, his brow furrowing. "What are you looking for here?" Selina looked up at him, her blue eyes shining with a mix of sadness and resolve. "Closure," she replied softly. "These ruins are all I have left. But there's something I need to find. Something that was lost when everything else fell apart." John didn't need to ask what that something was. He could see it in her eyes, an ache that was more than just the loss of a place, but the loss of a part of herself, a part of her people's soul. "I'll help you find it," he said, his voice steady, offering her the support she needed. Selina gave him a small nod, her expression softening. Together, they walked toward the structure. The closer they got, the more John could feel the presence of something powerful in the air. It was as if the very stone held secrets, as if the walls themselves were waiting to speak. When they finally reached the entrance, Selina paused, her hand resting on the ancient doorframe. "This is where it happened," she murmured, almost to herself. "Where everything changed." John stepped up beside her, his eyes scanning the entrance, noticing the intricate carvings on the walls. They told a story, one of triumph, of unity, of something greater. But the more he looked, the more he could see the cracks, the tension in the artwork. It wasn't just a story of creation, it was a story of a fall. Selina gently pushed the door open, the sound of the heavy stone scraping against the ground echoing through the silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but the room beyond was still intact, its walls lined with ancient technology that hummed faintly in the dark. The dim light from outside barely illuminated the room, but it was enough for John to see the central feature, a pedestal, with something resting on top. Selina walked toward it, her step slow, deliberate. As she approached, John could see her hands trembling slightly. She reached out and carefully lifted a small, intricate device from the pedestal. It was nothing extraordinary by human standards, just a small orb, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to pulse with life. But to Selina, it was everything. "This is what I've been searching for," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is the last piece of my people's legacy. The key to everything we lost." John stepped closer, watching her closely. He could see the weight of the moment in her eyes, the connection she had with this relic of the past. "What is it?" he asked, his voice soft. "What does it do?" Selina held the orb in her hands, staring at it for a long moment before looking up at him. "It's a memory," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It holds everything, everything that was, everything that we were. And now, it's all I have left." She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "I've been carrying this for so long, hoping that someday it would help me understand. But maybe it's time to let go." John didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the exhaustion of carrying the weight of an entire civilization on her shoulders. But there was something else there too, a spark of something, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this piece of the past would help her heal. "Whatever you decide," he said quietly, "I'll be here." Selina gave him a small, grateful smile, then closed her eyes, holding the orb to her chest. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The wind outside had died down, and the room was silent, save for the soft hum of the device in her hands. Time itself seemed to hold its breath as Selina stood there, a lone figure in the ruins of a forgotten empire, holding the last piece of her people's story. Selina held the orb tightly in her hands, her fingers wrapped around it as though she could draw strength from the faint glow pulsing within. The room around them was silent, the distant howling winds outside the ruined towers the only sound breaking the stillness. John stood by, watching her closely, his own heart heavy with the weight of her history. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the deep, aching pull between the past she had lost and the future that seemed so uncertain. "What do you plan to do with it?" John finally asked, his voice gentle but laced with curiosity. Selina's eyes flickered up to meet his, her expression unreadable for a moment. "I don't know," she admitted softly, her voice trembling just slightly. This device, it's all that's left of my people. Their history, their knowledge. But I don't know if it's enough to rebuild, or if it's just a reminder of what we lost. She lowered her gaze to the orb once more, her thumb brushing over its smooth surface. Maybe I've been holding onto it for too long, thinking that somehow it would bring back what's gone. But now, I'm not sure it can. John could see the strain in her posture, the burden of centuries of lost civilization weighing on her small frame. He knew she had been through so much, and yet here she was, standing alone in the heart of a fallen empire. It doesn't have to be the end, he said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, steady. Maybe it's not about bringing everything back. Maybe it's about moving forward with what you have now. You don't have to carry all of it alone. Selina looked up at him, her eyes searching his face as though trying to understand his words. There was a long pause before she spoke again. You don't understand, she said quietly, almost as if to herself. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. To have everything you've ever known, everything you've ever worked for, slip through your fingers. Her voice faltered slightly, but she pressed on. I thought I could fix it. That I could rebuild. But now, I see it all slipping away, and I don't know how to stop it. John felt a wave of compassion for her. She was strong, stronger than he could ever imagine, yet here she was, vulnerable and unsure. It reminded him of the human struggle, of how even the strongest people had moments of doubt. He stepped closer to her, his tone firm yet kind. It's okay to feel that way, he said softly. We all have those moments, where we feel like we've lost everything. But you're not alone. You have a chance now to decide what comes next. You don't have to be stuck in the past, Selina. She met his gaze, and for a brief moment, he saw the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. But they were still there, still strong and protective. She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the orb. Maybe you're right, she said, her voice still shaky but with a flicker of hope. Maybe it's time to stop looking back. To look ahead. John smiled, his expression warm with understanding. Exactly, he said, his voice reassuring. The future's still out there, and you're still here. That means there's something worth fighting for. Selina looked down at the orb one last time, her eyes lingering on it for a moment before she carefully placed it back on the pedestal. She stood there for a moment, the weight of her decision settling in. Then, with a deep breath, she turned to John. Let's go, she said softly. John nodded, relieved to see her take that first step toward moving forward. Together, they turned and walked out of the chamber, the ruins behind them a reminder of what had been, and what could still be. The sun was beginning to set outside, casting long shadows over the landscape. As they walked side by side, John couldn't help but feel that they were both on the brink of something new, something that neither of them could yet fully understand, but that would shape the path ahead. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel quite as overwhelming. As John and Selina made their way back through the ruins, the weight of their conversation lingered in the air. The silence was comfortable, neither of them feeling the need to speak. It was a strange moment of peace amidst the remnants of a civilization that once stood so tall. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the landscape, and the chill of the evening air began to settle in. John couldn't help but notice how different Selina seemed now, lighter somehow, as if she had shed some of the burden she had been carrying. The tension in her shoulders had eased, and her steps, once cautious, now seemed more assured. He stole a glance at her as they walked, his curiosity still piqued by everything she had revealed. So, what's next for you? He asked, breaking the silence. Selina glanced at him, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I'm not sure, she said, her voice softer than before. I've spent so long trying to hold on to the past, trying to rebuild something that can never be fixed. Maybe it's time to see what's ahead. John nodded, understanding more than she knew. The future's not something you can rebuild, but it's something you can build, he said. Whatever it is, you'll figure it out. Selina looked at him, her gaze steady. Thank you, she said quietly. I think I needed to hear that. They continued walking, the path ahead still uncertain but no longer daunting. As they reached the outskirts of the ruins, John noticed the landscape was starting to change. The broken towers gave way to open fields, the remnants of a once thriving city now just an echo in the distance. The contrast between the ancient, crumbling stone and the lush green fields was stark, but it felt like the beginning of something new. They had walked for what felt like hours, and the exhaustion from their journey was beginning to set in. John knew they wouldn't make it to any kind of settlement before nightfall, but that didn't matter. They were no longer searching for something that had been lost. They were walking toward something yet to be discovered. "We'll make camp here," he said, pointing to a small clearing ahead. Selina nodded in agreement, and they set to work quickly. John gathered some firewood, while Selina found a flat rock to sit on, her eyes scanning the horizon. As the fire crackled to life, the warmth from the flames contrasted with the cool air, and for the first time in a long while, John felt a sense of calm. He wasn't sure where the journey would take them next, but in that moment, it didn't seem to matter. They had made it this far together, and that was enough. "So," John said after a while, breaking the silence once more, "tell me more about your people. What were they like, before all of this?" Selina looked into the fire, her expression distant as memories from a time long past seemed to stir. "We were a proud people," she began, her voice steady but filled with a quiet sadness. "We believed in progress, in pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But we forgot the importance of balance. We reached too far, and in the end, we destroyed ourselves." John listened carefully, sensing the weight of her words. It was clear that the loss of her people was something she still carried deeply, and yet, she had chosen to continue. She wasn't letting the past define her future. "Do you ever think about going back?" he asked, his voice soft. Selina shook her head, a sad smile crossing her face. "I can't go back," she said. "There's nothing left to return to. But maybe I can start something new. Something better." John nodded, understanding that her journey wasn't just about the past or the ruins they had left behind. It was about moving forward, building something from the ashes. The fire crackled between them, the flames dancing as the night sky stretched out above them, filled with countless stars. For the first time in a long time, John felt a sense of hope for the future. He didn't know where it would lead, but with Selina by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The night passed quietly, the fire slowly dying down to embers as John and Selina sat in comfortable silence. The world around them had settled into a peaceful stillness, the sounds of the distant wind and the crackling fire the only reminders of the vast emptiness that surrounded them. Selina had fallen asleep first, her form curled up by the warmth of the fire. John, however, stayed awake a little longer, his mind wandering as he stared into the flickering flames. His thoughts were a tangle of questions, of what had brought them here and what lay ahead. The journey they had shared so far felt like the beginning of something much larger, but what that was, he wasn't sure. The weight of the ruins still pressed heavily on his mind. Those towering structures, once symbols of power and greatness, were now nothing more than forgotten monuments to a lost civilization. He wondered what it would take to rebuild something so grand, something that could stand the test of time. But then, he thought of Selina. She wasn't trying to rebuild the past, she was moving forward. It was a lesson he had learned from her in the quietest way. She had shown him that even when everything seemed lost, there was always something new to build, something worth fighting for. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, John stood up, stretching his stiff limbs. He glanced down at Selina, still asleep, her chest rising and falling in the soft rhythm of rest. For a moment, he simply watched her, her face peaceful, free from the weight of the past. She had a strength about her that he couldn't quite put into words. She wasn't just surviving, she was living. John smiled to himself, grateful for the chance to witness this transformation. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. As the sun's first rays lit up the landscape, Selina stirred, waking up to the new day. She stretched, blinking in the soft morning light, and then sat up, her gaze meeting John's. "Morning," she said softly, her voice still laced with sleep. "Morning," John replied, his smile genuine. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I expected," she said, her smile faint but warm. "Thanks to the fire." John nodded, his gaze shifting back to the remains of their campfire. "You know," he said, pausing as he found the right words, "I think we're ready to move on. The next step, whatever it may be." Selina looked thoughtful for a moment before standing up, brushing the dirt off her clothes. "You're right," she said, her tone steady. "There's no point staying here. We've seen the past, but we can't live in it." Her eyes met his, the determination in them unmistakable. "Let's find what comes next." John watched her for a moment, a feeling of admiration swelling inside him. She had embraced the unknown in a way that was inspiring. He wasn't sure how they would navigate the road ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't be alone. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. As they packed up their camp, John felt the weight of the journey ahead, but it no longer felt like a burden. There was something liberating about leaving the past behind and stepping into the future. With each step they took, the world seemed to open up in front of them, full of possibilities. The ruins were behind them now, just as the past was. What lay ahead was unknown, but it was theirs to explore. They walked side by side, the sun climbing higher in the sky, and for the first time since he'd met her, John felt certain that this journey, this partnership, was only just beginning. The journey had taken them far from the ruins, through forests of twisted trees and across vast open plains where the wind whispered across the endless horizon. John and Selina walked side by side, their footsteps in sync as they moved toward an unknown future. With each passing day, the bond between them grew stronger, the unspoken understanding of their shared journey becoming more apparent. There was a sense of quiet companionship between them, a trust that had developed naturally over the course of their travels. They were no longer just two individuals wandering through a desolate landscape, they had become a team, each relying on the other in ways that neither had expected. As the sun began to set on yet another day, casting long shadows across the landscape, John stopped to take in the view. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, the clouds stretching out like strokes of a painter's brush. He had never appreciated the beauty of nature so much before, not in this way, not with the weight of everything that had happened behind him. He turned to Selina, who was still walking ahead, her gaze distant. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying an undercurrent of genuine concern. Selina paused, looking up at him with a faint smile. Her violet eyes were softer now, no longer filled with the hardness they once carried. "Better," she replied, her voice steady. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant about moving forward. It's not easy, but I think I'm finally ready." John nodded, understanding more than she realized. "It's not about forgetting," he said, his voice filled with quiet wisdom. "It's about carrying what matters with you and letting go of what holds you back." Selina looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's strange," she said after a moment. "I thought I had to rebuild everything. I thought that was the only way to honor my people. But now I think maybe it's about creating something new. Something better." John smiled at her, the warmth of the moment washing over him. "You've already started," he said simply. "One step at a time." They continued their walk as the evening deepened, the stars slowly appearing in the sky above them. There was something calming about the night, the vastness of the universe stretching out before them, filled with endless possibilities. John could feel the weight of the journey still ahead, but for the first time, it didn't seem as daunting. They had come so far, together, and the road ahead, while unknown, didn't seem as frightening as it once had. As the night grew colder, they found a sheltered spot among the trees to set up camp. The fire crackled to life as they settled in, the warmth of the flames providing comfort against the chill of the air. Selina sat beside the fire, her gaze lost in thought as the flames flickered in her eyes. John watched her quietly, the reflection of the firelight dancing across her face. For a moment, he wondered what it must have been like for her, to lose so much and still find the strength to keep going. But he knew that her strength wasn't just in surviving, it was in the way she chose to move forward. in the way she embraced the possibility of a new beginning. "You know," John said after a long pause, breaking the silence, "I've never really understood what it means to have a home. Not in the way you do." Selina turned to him, her eyebrows slightly raised. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. John leaned back against the tree, his gaze on the fire. "I've never had a place that felt like mine. Always moving from one place to the next. Never settling down. But you built something. Even if it's gone now, you created it. You gave it life." Selina was quiet for a moment, her eyes soft. "I think that's why it hurts so much," she said, her voice quiet. "Because I gave everything to something that's gone. But maybe that's what life is. You build, you create, and sometimes it falls apart. But you don't stop building." John nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. He had always been someone who lived in the moment, never thinking too much about the past or the future. But maybe, just maybe, there was something to be said for creating something that lasted. Something that meant something. As they sat there by the fire, the night deepening around them, John felt a sense of peace wash over him. They weren't running from the past anymore. They were building something together, in the quiet of the night, under the vast expanse of the stars. And for the first time in a long while, John realized that it was enough. It was more than enough. As the days passed, John and Selina continued their journey through the vast wilderness, the landscape shifting from dense forests to wide open fields. The path ahead was uncertain, but each step brought them closer to something new, something neither of them could fully define yet. The air had grown warmer as spring settled in, the once cold nights now giving way to mild evenings, and the days bathed in sunlight. It was a welcome change after the long, harsh stretches of travel. Selina had become more at ease with each passing day. Her steps were lighter, her eyes more open to the world around her. She spoke more often now, telling John stories of her people, of their ways, of the beautiful cities they had built before everything had crumbled. John listened intently, captivated by the way she spoke of her past. It was clear she had lived a life of great importance, and though much of that life had been lost, the resilience in her voice was unmistakable. As they walked, John began to notice small changes in Selina. The way she laughed more easily now, the way she took in the world around her with a new sense of wonder, as though she was rediscovering it for the first time. She had been through so much, and yet, she was still standing. For the first time, John began to see that Selina wasn't just a survivor, she was a creator, a builder, someone who had the strength to rise again after everything had been taken from her. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the shade of a large tree, taking a break from their walk, Selina turned to him with a thoughtful look on her face. "You know, John," she began, "I never thought I'd be here, like this, with someone like you. I always thought I'd be alone, lost in the ruins of my past, with no one to help me find a way forward." John met her gaze, his expression warm but serious. "You're not alone, Selina. You've never been alone. I'm here, and I'll be with you every step of the way, whatever comes next." She smiled softly, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the moment. The sound of a bird calling in the distance broke the silence, and they both looked up at the clear blue sky, the warmth of the day spreading across them like a gentle embrace. They sat there for a long while, the quiet settling over them like a blanket. Eventually, John stood up, stretching his limbs as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. "We should get moving," he said, his voice laced with determination. "There's still a long way to go, and I think we're ready." Selina stood too, brushing the dirt off her clothes. She nodded, her expression now one of resolve. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and strong. Together, they set off once more, the path before them stretching endlessly into the distance. The world around them was vast, full of unknowns, but for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt afraid. They had each other, and that was enough. As they walked, John glanced over at Selina, her violet eyes reflecting the fading light of the day. He couldn't help but feel that, somehow, they were both finding their way, one step at a time. The past no longer held them back, the future, whatever it might be, was theirs to create. With each step, they moved closer to whatever was waiting for them on the other side of the horizon. The journey had taken them deeper into unfamiliar terrain, the world around them growing more mysterious with each step. The landscape had shifted once again, from the open plains to dense, uncharted forests where the trees stood tall and ancient, their twisted branches reaching toward the sky like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the sunlight filtered through the leaves in delicate beams. It was a beautiful, eerie place, and yet there was something comforting about the quiet of the forest, as if the world was holding its breath. John and Selina walked in silence, the weight of their pasts behind them and the future unknown. There were no words left between them, the shared understanding that had formed between them was enough. It was a peaceful kind of companionship, the kind that only grows when two people have been through something together, something that words could never fully explain. John occasionally glanced over at Selina, noticing the way the sunlight caught the strands of her silver hair, the way she moved through the forest with a quiet grace. He could see the change in her, the shift from the weight of her past to the possibilities of the future. She no longer seemed burdened by the ruins they had left behind, she was lighter, more open. She was walking toward something new, something that only she could define. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the more it seemed to embrace them. The trees grew thicker, the path narrowing, but it didn't feel suffocating. It was as if the forest was offering them shelter, a place to rest, to breathe. John felt a strange sense of belonging, as if this place had always been meant for them. As the day wore on, they found a small clearing by a stream, the water flowing gently over smooth stones. The sound of the water was calming, and it seemed like the perfect place to rest. They set up camp quietly, the evening unfolding without much fanfare. There was no need for words. The fire crackled to life, and for a moment, they sat together in its warm glow, watching the flames dance. The stars began to appear in the night sky, one by one, until the heavens were filled with them. It was a vast, infinite expanse, and for the first time in a long time, John felt a sense of peace. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. Selina looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting the light from the fire and the sky. She was quiet for a long time, lost in thought, before she spoke. "Do you ever wonder," she said, her voice soft, "if there's something more than just surviving? I used to think I was just living to make it through, to rebuild what was lost. But now, I think maybe it's more about creating something new. Something worth living for." John turned to her, meeting her gaze, and for the first time in a while, he realized that they were both thinking the same thing. The past didn't define them anymore. They were free to shape their own future, whatever that might look like. "I think you're right," he said, his voice steady. "It's about finding something worth fighting for, something worth building. And we don't have to do it alone." Selina smiled, a soft, genuine smile that seemed to light up her entire face. "No, we don't." They sat there for a long time, the fire slowly dying down, the stars above them growing brighter as the night deepened. For the first time since they had begun their journey, John felt a sense of hope. It wasn't just the hope that they would survive, but the hope that they could build something new, something better. They had come so far, and now, it was time to move forward. The future was theirs to create, one step at a time.